Thank you. I'm really glad this class is happening. I wish it was around when I was at ASU, but when I was 21, I was an undergraduate student at the University of Utah, which is where I'm originally from. And I was working part-time at the Natural History Museum in the museum floor and in the archives and the archaeology lab, actually. And then I was also working at a ski resort, driving the tram at Snowbird Ski Resort, if any of you are skiers. And I had this idea that I would be really interested in continuing working in public engagement, like in that museum kind of area in archaeology. And I did a lot of GIS, a lot of geographic information science associated with archaeology and geography. I didn't really know what it was called yet. This was back in the early 2000s. I don't think citizen science had quite taken hold, beyond the Cornell Ornithology Lab projects and the amateur astronomy projects. So it wasn't quite a thing yet in most people's minds, but I knew I was really interested in public engagement and talking to the public. I always enjoyed the days where we were able to take some of our archaeology artifacts and go to the museum floor and do some displays and some tabling for folks. And so then when it came time for me to decide to either continue to be a ski bum for the rest of my life or to go to grad school, I decided to go to grad school and focus on GIS and archaeology and went to Texas Tech. And that's when I started to kind of figure out that citizen science was a real thing and slowly realized that. We did a lot of public engagement with people at our archaeology sites, had the local community come help us do some digging and things like that. And then I finally decided what I wanted to do was really focus on that aspect of public engagement directly with science and doing science with scientists. And that's what ended me up at ASU, because ASU was so flexible in what you can study. I was in the geography program, the Geographic Sciences and Urban Planning School with, now she's Provost Wentz, Dean Libby Wentz when I was there. And she was so wonderful. It let me kind of explore and figure out kind of what I wanted to do. And geography is a great discipline for doing a lot of different things that, they're related to space and place, but you can kind of focus on human geography or sciences. And so that's how I ended up kind of focusing on biogeography and having citizen scientists help us collect data for animals in Denali National Park in Alaska. And then through that, I got connected with working with local communities in the Phoenix area with the Knowledge Exchange for Resilience folks, which are still there. I was at the beginning of the ideation of the Knowledge Exchange for Resilience, and they're still doing a lot of community-based projects. We initially started out with a project that looked at mapping heat for people that didn't have air conditioning or had some other elements in the house that didn't allow them to cool down their house very much. So we had them record the temperatures in the house and help them figure out how to best mitigate that heat in their homes. And so it took me a while to kind of get to where I am. But I'm really, excited for the projects I've been working on. And then here at Oregon State University, I'm a professional faculty in the STEM Research Center. So we focus on STEM education, and I'm a citizen science person, evaluating a lot of different citizen science projects, from bees to helping people that do snow observations to all sorts of things. And so it's been a really awesome kind of roundabout way to get to where I am. And when I was doing a PhD research in Alaska, and I was looking for other people that have done citizen science focused dissertations, there wasn't hardly any out there. And now lately I've been seeing more and more people do their graduate research on citizen science, do undergraduate research projects on citizen science. And it's really exciting to see that I'm not the only one anymore and that more people are doing it. And I have some graduate students myself now that are focusing on citizen science and various aspects of it. So it's been an exciting ride.
Oh, that's excellent. And I'm just curious, was that the heat mapping, was that with David Hondula?
Yeah, partially with David Hondula. So we did a project in people's homes, and then we also had, we piloted this idea for doing a heat walk where people walked around the Edison Eastlake neighborhood, that they're revitalizing in downtown Phoenix too. And I think they've, since I've left ASU, have done some more with that. So it's exciting to see them grow that project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's really cool. You worked in one of the hottest places. You worked with snow.
Yes. I personally prefer the snow because I'm from Utah, but I do still love Arizona, and I love when I get to go back down to visit ASU, but I don't miss the summers anymore.
I hear you. Well, thank you. And one of the things that is exciting as well, in addition to being a faculty member working with citizen science, you are also in a leadership position in the field of citizen science. and it's still, you mentioned you didn't know that maybe there was citizen science before, earlier, outside of Cornell. It's still being defined as, and this is an actual question of mine, would you call it a movement, a discipline, a tool?
All of them. Yeah, all of them.
Okay.
It depends. Yeah, it really depends on how people utilize citizen science. I think it started as a tool. You know, citizen science kind of in its modern form started about 100 years ago or so with like the Audubon's Christmas bird count, astronomy clubs and things like that. And it was kind of a tool to get more data, and also a public engagement thing too. It was kind of like a data collection tool. And now I think it's turning into, it's a discipline now because people are researching citizen science. Like I do mostly evaluation and research of citizen science instead of leading projects anymore. I'm kind of on this meta level. So it's a movement, it's a discipline, and it's a tool. It depends kind of how people come into it and use it, but it's all of them. And it's really hard to describe when you're asking for financial support and funding and things like that. It's kind of hard to describe like what citizen science is. And I usually just say that the field of citizen science, but it doesn't quite seem right. It's kind of all of them mixed together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's you know, it is as you said, kind of, it's still defining itself.
Yes, and that's what we're grappling with in the Citizen Science Association. So I'm the chair of the board of the CSA, and that's what we're trying to define ourselves as an organization. And that's one of our issues is like, well, what do people come to us for? Do they come to us because they need help with this tool? They come to this because they think they're part of the discipline or the movement. So we're struggling with those questions too for the CSA.
Well, and I know also with academia, even related, what to outsiders might be related studies, you have different schools where they may not be as supportive of other ways of looking at things.
Right.
And one of the things too is, in the time that you've been involved, what changes have you seen in participation, both with researchers and citizen scientists? What's the growth there?
So since I've been involved, it's definitely expanded from very much focused on like a few big projects like iNaturalist, folks using iNaturalist and eBird and the Cornell Ornithology Lab things. So lots of these smaller projects coming together. And a lot more universities are supportive of people doing their research through citizen science. And that's when it kind of becomes a tool, right? And I have to say ASU and a couple other universities were some of the first higher education institutions on board with that concept to do scientific research, also a great way to connect with the public. So I really appreciate that about ASU. I know that University of North Carolina has also done something, North Carolina State University has done some of that too. And there's some other great examples, but now I see more and more folks, being amenable to recognizing citizen science as like a proper way to do science, and funding agencies like the National Science Foundation and NASA has also opened up a lot more funding opportunities for citizen science projects. NASA just announced the awardees of the Earth Science for Citizen Science solicitation. And so they have a bunch of new Earth Science focused citizen science projects that are funded by NASA. And so that's been really great to see, like people are recognizing that it's not just an educational public outreach tool or discipline or movement, but it also is a great scientific tool and movement and discipline. And so there's support coming from both sides, folks that are really interested in education and science, which is great. And then we've also seen differences in participation. So before you think about a citizen scientist, and there's some data to back this up, that it's usually an older white person, usually male. Some projects have more female bias, and then it depends on the project. But now there's this brand new report from, I think it was released over the summer from the Pew Research Center, that shows that since COVID-19 pandemic, citizen scientists are actually younger, more diverse folks that are doing citizen science. And so I think people recognizing that citizen science is a great way to do a really interesting, in-depth experiential learning and scientific activity with their students, if they're a K-12 teacher or informal educators, and a way to reach them when they can't maybe do it in person. They can have them do some online or virtual citizen science projects. So that's been really exciting to see. I really hope that we see those numbers and that demographic shift stay, and that we don't see that kind of go back to the older retired white person who's really into birding, which is great. Those people are wonderful, but has so much more potential to reach other people, citizen science. So I hope to see if the Pew does another research study in a year or two, that we see those numbers kind of stay really nice and diverse, and see that a lot of different people are getting involved in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, no, that's cool. As chair of the US-based Citizen Science Association, what would you say are the two top priority issues that the association wants to address?
So we have been really focused on connecting the network of citizen science practitioners, now also focusing even more on connecting volunteers. We have an event coming up in May called SciCon, which kind of think of as Comic-Con for citizen science. And Darlene's a part of that, Darlene Cavalier. And so we're working together with ASU on that. So one big thing is connecting everybody. And then once we get everybody connected, have people share best practices, promising practices to elevate the integrity and excellence in citizen science, to make sure that we're doing really great science, we're doing really great educational and public outreach, and increasing scientific literacy of the volunteers who are participating. And so we're really focused on connecting people, and then making sure we're all doing a really great job of doing citizen science and being involved in citizen science. And we have wonderful working groups that help with that. We're doing our next conference. It's going to be virtual, called SciStarter Virtual, in May, the whole month of May. We were hoping to have it in person at ASU this summer, but of course the pandemic stopped that. So next summer we're planning to have it down in Tempe. So cross your fingers we can still do it next summer.
Absolutely. And the issues that are being addressed, how much interaction do you have with the other citizen science associations? There's Europe, there's Australia, there's
Asia.
East
There's
Asia.
a Latin American one that's getting going, I think.
Yep. Are the issues the same worldwide, or are there different issues?
Yes and no. I know that the European group, they've been very focused on data practices, and so our data metadata working group and their folks that are working on that have been very connected with the PPSR core, that's the Public Participation in Science Research core metadata standards. And there's a whole brand new side of the citizenscience.org website that talks about data metadata. If you are a data nerd and really into data science and citizen science data, that is for you. That is very in-depth. So our data metadata working group has been working very, very closely with all of the other data metadata citizen science folks at the other associations, because they're trying to make that a global standard. So that was our kind of like jewel of us working with all the other citizen science associations. And then we also go to each other's conferences, present at each other's conferences. Quite a few of us from CSA presented at ESCA, which is the European Citizen Science Association's conference this last year. We usually have a great contingency of amazing Australians that come to the US for our CSA conference. Hopefully they'll be joining us virtually this year, but a really, really awesome group. And they're just getting going as well. So they're kind of figuring out how we can work together. So we see all these groups popping up throughout the world. It's really exciting. And then we at CSA have also been thinking about, what can we do more regionally in the United States to support some smaller groups? And so nothing formal has happened yet, but there's been some discussions about having regional groups, regional associations that are kind of a subset or affiliated with the CSA. So stay tuned, maybe in the next year or two, we might be doing something more with that too. But it's really exciting to see all these groups popping up all over the world, focused on their kind of niche of citizen science.
And I'm just curious, this wasn't one of my, this is a follow-up question. It wasn't one of my pre-written questions, but I'm just curious, what's the range of members in the CSA? I went to Raleigh a couple of years ago in 2019, and there were a few librarians there, not that many, but even as you said, in the past couple of years, I've seen more of that being on. But there's, of course, you've got faculty, researchers, but you've got like park rangers and
yes.
School public relations officers, and Can you
Yeah.
speak to that a little bit?
We don't have great data on that right now. We're hoping to collect some of that data for this virtual conference. What we do know is that we are pretty heavy in the academic side. And that's something we're grappling with as an organization is, are we a professional, academically focused organization? Not really, because we want to be bigger than academia, but that's how the organization got started, was kind of with a lot of academics that are doing citizen science got together and started the organization, mainly starting at Cornell Ornithology Lab and moving on from there. So we're trying to be more than that while also serving that community, because it's a large base of our group. But we have a lot of educators that come to the conferences that are involved, a lot of folks in the nonprofit world too, people that are doing community science focused projects or doing nonprofit government projects as well. But we're trying to expand that reach beyond academia, beyond nonprofits as well. Librarians are getting informal educators, also thinking about folks that are park rangers and things, people that are doing other things. There's a nice big federal community that's been involved with us as well, the people that are involved with NASA, USGS and things like that, and the EPA that also are coming to us more so. We have a really great partnership that got started with NASA recently. So we've been helping host these NASA-specific citizen science webinars to talk about what does it mean to be a citizen science practitioner within NASA and thinking about NASA's priorities. And so we're hoping we can reach a more diverse group of folks, getting outside of that academia realm while keeping those folks happy, but expanding our reach. So, it's hard for me to say that I'm in academia, but, we see a lot more citizen science popping up outside of academia. It's been really great. A lot of government folks are doing citizen science, and more of those people are publishing papers on it as well. So,
wow, you're really getting quite the view on the ground as all this is going on in your role, right?
Yes.
That's great. The Citizen Science Association, CSA, publishes an open access peer-reviewed journal called Citizen Science Theory and Practice. How important is scholarly literature to the acceptance of citizen science in scientific circles?
It unfortunately is very important. There's a really great paper. This is another thing, if you want your students to read it, Andrea Wiggins, 2018, about a scientific product inventory. So which that group, that writing group is trying to do is trying to say that, yes, scholarly publications are a great output, a scientific output of citizen science, but there's all these other things that citizen science produce for science products. But it still is the gold standard. Like in NASA, that's kind of their metric for counting successful NASA citizen science project. I know no one other government agencies do something similar, and in academia, if you're in academia, right? So that's still really important. The really important thing about the Citizen Science Theory Practice Journal is, though, it's not all about publishing science results in there. It's about publishing about the discipline of citizen science, which is great. And we're actively working on trying to open up that publishing process beyond academia to make it easier for anybody to publish, understand the publishing process. We actually just submitted a grant to get some funding to test out and pilot a training program for non-academics to learn how to become a paper reviewer and to get into the paper reviewing process and try to open that up and change that process a little bit to make it more friendly to non-academic folks. But it still is the metric that you get measured by, but we're hoping we can change that a little bit, change how that is measured. And I would really like to see a de-emphasis of scholarly publications, because I've published a bunch of articles myself, but not everybody reads all of them or gets cited. And so I'd like to see other outputs from citizen science that are more digestible, that people can, more people beyond the academics would be interested in reading. But it still is really important. We're hoping to change some of that with the Citizen Science Theory and Practice Journal, make that a little more open process, less academic.
Yeah, even with that, I recall when I think it first came out, looking at when I first became aware of it, looking at the requirements, and I remember you could write an essay, yes. And I was like, what? An essay? That's
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 one of the
great.
things you're trying to do, yeah. make it more approachable, not just for academics, make it more approachable, but still, because still getting academics interested in supporting citizen science. And that's one of the ways to do it, is to have a journal. So.
Well, right, it brings along different, different populations too to do that. Well, thank you. I have one more question for you. Actually, it's a two-part. So what I've been closing with people is, what would be your elevator speech to encourage other researchers to utilize citizen science in their work, and then for you to join a professional citizen science association as well? What would you pitch to them?
So if it's a scientist, like at a university or at NASA or NOAA or something, and they're very focused on getting good scientific data, like a good researcher, I would tell them that this is a great way to do your broader impact. So reach, so a lot of times we're applying for funding for like the NSF or NASA. They want to know, like, beyond just your scientific work, how is your project like benefiting society? Citizen science is a great way to do that. But I would also, tell them that you will benefit. You'll probably learn something new. You'll probably learn a more efficient, better way to do your project. You'll probably learn some more kind of on the ground knowledge, especially if you're like an earth scientist working in some specific habitat area or something, or some specific region. You can get some really great local knowledge for your project. I would not use the argument that it is cheaper. There's some paper out there, I can't remember which one, that said that citizen science is cheaper. It is not cheaper. It could be more expensive, but you get a lot of bang for your buck, though. You can say that you get this great public outreach opportunity. You're really benefiting the public, encouraging more people to be more scientifically literate and involved in science. You also can gain some great new data and local knowledge. And you can also, get even more data, because you can have, instead of just a handful of graduate students or research assistants, you can have people going out there and collecting data for you every day, all the time, especially if you're doing something with like, observations of different animals or earth phenomenon like clouds. Instead of having one person go out and observe a cloud, on a regular schedule, you can have like thousands of people helping you collect that data, right? So you get more bang for your buck. It's not necessarily cheaper, but you get a little more bang for your buck with citizen science. So that's my science, like researcher side, focusing on that. And then if it's somebody who's more interested in educational research, it's such an authentic STEM learning experience. We always talk about like authentic experiential learning opportunities and place-based learning. You can't get more authentic than actually doing the work for a scientist and then helping them through, not just data collection, but sometimes citizen science helps with analysis and things like that, and even help author papers and things. So
that's great.